PSP was home to a range of incredible fighting games. With the likes of Tekken and Street Fighter, players were spoiled for choice when it came to picking up something new. Adding to the wealth of options was Dragon Ball Z Tag Team, which looked to bring over the success of the home console games to the handheld. Like many fighting games, there's a selection of modes to get stuck into, with the most prominent being Dragon Walker. It serves as a way to go through the entire Dragon Ball Z story, with the player having to guide their character through an open world map while encountering enemies along the way. If I'm being honest, this mode feels pretty lackluster. The storytelling is choppy, and don't be surprised if you find a typo here and there. Of course, the main attraction is the fighting itself. The free range of movement and the enormity of the stages wonderfully recreates that Dragon Ball Z feeling, and makes the up to 4 characters at once battling manageable. A simple lock-on system allows players to keep tabs on who they want through all of the commotion, and the PSP's simplified control scheme makes recreating the series' most intense fights both easy and fun. Presentation was amped up over the previous PSP title, with the character models featuring much more detail than the plain old cel-shaded style, and the environments and attacks were also given a graphical overhaul. Perhaps what is most impressive though, the series of special attacks each of the characters can perform. The screen lights up in style and presents some fantastic animation as each ability plays out. If you're a fan of Dragon Ball Z and just so happen to have a PSP knocking about, this one is well worth picking up. Developed by Big Studios and originally released in Europe as a PSP launch title, Pursuit Force is a game that thrives on originality by mixing a handful of exciting action game concepts and executing them in style. After crime has overridden the capital city and the forces of law and order are no longer capable of containing the mayhem, a special unit known as Pursuit Force is created to counteract the threat. As the player, you get to take on the pretty hefty career mode that tasks you with catching bad guys by utilizing a whole range of tools to get the job done. Everything is primarily split up into missions. From escorting to boss encounters and on foot sections, there's a serious amount of variety to each of them, which really helps the gameplay from becoming stale. The most enjoyable for myself were the pursuits, which sees you tracking down a target and leaping from your vehicle onto theirs in order to take them down. Seeing all of this play out on the handheld screen looks absolutely incredible, but what takes it to the next level are the boss fights I mentioned earlier. Pursuit Force is a game that is not afraid to challenge you, and it will no doubt result in some sore thumbs and raised voices, but the sense of accomplishment more than outweighs the difficulty of achieving it. Visually, Pursuit Force impresses in terms of its scope and its speed. It's easily one of the best looking games on the PSP. All of the characters, cars and environments have a surprising amount of detail for a portable game. The animation is smooth and the transitions between each one are generally hiccup free. Overall, Pursuit Force is the real deal. In terms of the PSP, no pure action game is able to compare. It's an incredible achievement that every PSP owner should experience. Ever since its introduction on the PlayStation 1, the Siphon Filter series continued to evolve and refine what made it so memorable in the first place: relentless stealth action gameplay. Now, Logan's Shadow is essentially an expansion rather than a full-blown sequel to the impressive Dark Mirror that released a year prior. The gameplay is largely very similar, with minor tweaks here and there. However, the production value clearly saw a boost, with more detailed and chaotic environments for the player to explore, along with more interactive set pieces that take the action to the next level. Fans of Dark Mirror will know that its most outstanding feature was that it managed to fit all of the functionality of a typical console shooter into a handheld package without hindering the gameplay in any way. The controls in Logan's Shadow are extremely complex, but once you get the hang of it, you'll never think twice about what to press or how to perform something on the fly. Visually, Logan's Shadow really takes advantage of the PSP hardware, offering detailed character models, diverse and gorgeous environments, complete with stunning water effects and lifelike animations. Grandiose explosions and fog effects are abound, and frequent use of excellent lighting effects really create a rich and believable world. Best of all, even with explosions, gunfire and multiple foes on screen, the game never suffers from any slowdown or frame rate issues. Not once. There is no doubt that Logan's Shadow is clearly one of the greatest games on the PSP. The brilliant control scheme and perfect gameplay it offers is incredibly hard to topple. Logan's Shadow is the action game to get if you own a PSP. Starting out life way back in 1986, Outrun laid the groundwork for the racing genre and provided one of the most popular ways to spend your time at the arcades. Its simple premise would keep players coming back time and time again, which cemented it as one of the most memorable games in the history of the medium. It plays like many of the other arcade races out there, but adds a huge emphasis upon drifting and timing into the mix to create what is one of the most enjoyable racing games on the PSP. It offers a few choices when it comes to play. The most enjoyable of these has to be the Impress Your Girlfriend mode, which is just as highly amusing as it is addictive. Think back to Crazy Taxi. Remember how if the ride was more thrilling, you got more money? Well, in this girlfriend mode, she requests certain things for you to do, such as weaving in and out of traffic, drifting through corners, or actually hitting all of the cars on the road. Racking up the highest scores is so much fun and easily the best way to play this game. The other option is kind of like what you would consider the main play mode. It's normal races, but for the most part you get different cars and up to 4 different difficulties that you need to work your way through. Besides normal races though, you have drift contests and knockout rounds, which really help the overall replay value of the game. With over 30 different locations, each race is varied and interesting. You'll find yourself starting out by the coast, working your way through the city and its outskirts, and finally the mountains, which all bring a range of visual touches that add a sense of believability to each race. If you're the type of player who loves games that provide a quick pick up and play mentality, this one would make a welcome addition to your collection. Long before the Assassin's Creed franchise ran itself into the ground, and enjoyed a period of incredible games and spin-offs that cemented it as one of the greatest series of recent times. Bloodlines sees you once again filling the role of Altair and sketches in the events that transpired after the first game. The Assassins and mortal enemies, the Templars, have established a base on Cyprus to recruit the locals to their cause. This naturally prompts Altair to take them out one by one and slowly topple their influence in the area. Altair has some very envious skills when it comes to climbing and being able to fall from very high places and not get hurt. You'll need to get to grips with the controls rather quickly, as you'll find yourself scaling buildings in order to synchronize and open up the world map. Once you've found your target, you're given several options when it comes to taking them down, and this is where most of the fun lies. You can take the stealthy route and cling to the rooftops, or run in like a madman and take them on sword to sword. Unfortunately, it just never reaches the highs of the games that came before it, as the overall gameplay just doesn't feel as responsive due to the rather awkward controls. But for the purpose of this video, when it comes to visuals, Bloodlines is no doubt one of the best looking games on the system. It looks like what the first game in the series would be if it was ever ported to the PlayStation 2. But even with these limitations, the graphics are highly detailed, with great looking models and vistas that really show what the PSP was capable of. Overall, Assassin's Creed Bloodlines is perfect for portable standards, and running around in the world is pretty fluid even if the controls were a bit janky. Nevertheless, I found sneaking around and assassinating people very satisfying. It'll take you about 6 hours to finish depending on your playstyle, so don't expect much in terms of replayability, but if you're a fan of the stealth genre or the Assassin's Creed franchise as a whole, this one is well worth giving a go. There was no shortage of quality action RPGs on the PSP, and one of my favourites was Phantasy Star Portable 2. If you're at all familiar with the original Dreamcast games, you'll know exactly what to expect here. The gameplay and obsessive character building are once again the main forces that drive it. When you begin, you build your character from the ground up, choosing everything from their clothes and accessories to the pitch and tone of their voice. Now, the gameplay doesn't shine quite as brightly as the customization, though it isn't by any means bad. You control your creative character and missions that generally have you going from point A to point B, opening locks and slaying enemies along the way. Like Monster Hunter, this game is all about finding the best items, making your character super strong and never pausing to enjoy what you've got. The combat works well enough to keep things lively, but only truly impresses during the game's many boss fights. Some of the bosses are truly nightmarish in their difficulty, that is until you go back, grind, power up and return to triumph. You wouldn't truly expect such a small online game to run this smoothly, but it's there and undeniable. Even with a full party of 4 and God knows how many different weapons, armors and faces to load, not to mention calculating so many damage variables at once, this game just simply does not quit. Admittedly, there is a bit of a trade-off as there are a few pop-in and draw distance issues, but it's nothing that takes away from the overall quality of the presentation. In short, Phantasy Star Star Portable 2 is an excellent game that will last you for hours on end, so if you're the type of player that likes to get stuck into RPGs, this one is a solid choice. After the somewhat lackluster Wipeout Fusion, all eyes were on Liverpool studio to take the series back to its roots. The result was Wipeout Pure, which more than proved that there was still life in the long-running series. At its core, the game is a futuristic combat racer that pits together several opponents across a wide variety of stages and lets the mayhem unfold. What really sets the game aside from Fusion though is its physics engine. The last game had a very flat feel, with your ship being pretty much glued to the track, rather than having any real sense that it was floating, and it made for some very stale races. Pure, on the other hand, completely reimagined this aspect, with it feeling a lot more faithful to the older games in the series. Now, as you would expect with most racing games, there's several modes to get stuck into. You've got single race, tournament, and finally zone. The first two are pretty self-explanatory, but zone is something a bit special, and easily one of the most enjoyable modes to try out. The idea is to simply direct a craft around the track for as long as possible, as it gets faster and faster as time goes on. Once you reach zones of around 40 to 50, you really start to appreciate the speeds that this game can reach. And speed is something Pure has in abundance. There's a noticeable difference between all of the different classes of ships, which means that there's a pretty steep learning curve to overcome each time you advance, but upon mastering them, I really cannot describe how incredible it feels to weave in and out of corners whilst dodging missiles and racing to first place. One obvious, mind-blowing aspect is the game's beautiful and rich visuals. I was simply blown away by its graphical capabilities, and Wipeout Pure not only features very colourful and lush environments, but with all the frantic action going on, the game runs at a very consistent and fluid frame rate as well. The tracks have great variation, and it shows what a competent developer can do with limited power. The superb track designs and the lush graphics make this game simply irresistible. For the fans of the franchise that missed the old school Wipeout they loved so dearly, Wipeout Pure brought it back with a bang. If you're one of those fans, make sure to pick this up, as you won't be disappointed. Deadhead Fred is easily one of the most unique games that ever released for the PSP. The player takes on the role of Fred Newman, a private detective who got too deep into his last case and lost his life in his head because of it. Your goal is to investigate the grisly details of your demise, and in doing so you'll become acquainted with the dark forces that are pulling the strings of your town, the aptly named Hope Falls. Now, the dialogue of Deadhead Fred is witty and entertaining, and these traits are amplified by the quality of the voice actors. The story is clearly the star of the show, but thankfully the gameplay more than measures up as well. The basic hook involves a selection of different heads that the player can switch on the fly. There are 8 different heads in all, and each one offers Fred a new way to play. Some heads are more suited to dealing massive damage to foes, whilst others offer unparalleled agility and the power of temporary flight. Their uses extend far beyond trivial matters, with head switching playing a vital role in many of the game's puzzles. For example, if you need to douse out a fire, you can use the corpse head to suck out water from a nearby fire hydrant and then blow it out over the burning area. Now, combat is pretty solid and becomes far more challenging as the game progresses. The speed and pace of each battle is more or less up to the player, as the enemies are generally cautious, and while the AI isn't as advanced as some other games out there, there are occasions where you're mobbed by a group of enemies and the difficulty raises significantly. When it comes to graphics, Deadhead Fred simply looks amazing on the PSP. May it be the various subtle touches like the liquid in Fred's jarhead sloshing around as he moves, or the generous range of locations you'll find yourself visiting. To the group of characters that make up the cast, it's a game that just oozes style. If you've never got around to playing it back in the day, Deadhead Fred is still well worth picking up and giving a go. I've always been a huge fan of the Ace Combat series, and Skies of Deception on the PSP is without a doubt one of my favourite entries. As the player, you take to the skies in one of several planes that are slowly dealt out over the campaign. As you would expect, it's all largely split up into a series of missions that present a variety of objectives to complete. From standard dogfights to precision bombing runs and escorts, the game constantly keeps the player on their toes and demands an understanding of the mechanics in play. Control is generally straightforward, straightforward and won't take too long to pick up thanks to the more arcadey approach to the gameplay. Once you're in the skies and encounter an enemy, the array of weaponry is a welcome inclusion that further enhances your options when it comes to taking them down. You've got standard weapons such as guns and missiles, as well as more exotic weaponry like EMPs. When it comes to presentation, Skies of Deception looks really impressive on the small screen. Each of the planes are lovingly detailed, as well as the world in which they occupy. Small cities litter the landscape, which rise and fall to provide an engaging space to do battling. Topping this off are various weather effects and times of day that add a distinct atmosphere to each mission, and together with the music, it makes for some pretty tense action. On the whole, Ace Combat Skies of Deception is a compelling game with enough variety to invite multiple replays. It's a serious amount of content. Admittedly, the difficulty can be frustrating, but the gameplay is addictive enough for that one more try and one more mission feeling. It's hands down one of my favourite games on the system, and I cannot recommend it enough. Kingdom of Paradise is a pretty unique action RPG that all centers around martial arts and sword fighting. It takes place in ancient China and depicts the struggle between 5 separate clans vying for power over the region. As the player, you take on the role of a young man named Shimbu, who sets out to retrieve a series of magical swords which are told to bring with them incredible powers. Now, like many other action RPGs, you can expect to find yourself traveling a vast kingdom and interacting with a cast of NPCs which all add a real weight to the narrative that unfolds. But where Kingdom of Paradise truly comes alive is within battle. The whole system relies upon a selection of scrolls that can be located throughout the world. The more you collect, the more intricate your combos become, which opens up a generous amount of ways to approach the enemy. On top of this, a pretty extensive magic system is included as well, which manages to spice up the battles even further with elemental based attacks as well as defensive options when the odds are stacked against you. Of course, with the wealth of fighting options and scrolls available, it translates to a serious amount of replay value, which will keep you playing for quite some time to come. Visually, Kingdom of Paradise is vibrant and beautiful. Every scene explodes with detail and colour of each respective area, and the character models are very well done, especially the realistic facial animations which look incredible on the small screen. If you're on the lookout for a great RPG to jump into, Kingdom of Paradise would make for a solid choice. Well, that does it for today's video. Keep an eye out for part 4 as that will be coming up soon, so don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to get notified about new videos. You can follow me on all of the socials to stay up to date and also join the growing community on Discord to meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters Rhino, Skill Jim, Nano, Steve, Richard, Amy, Daniel, Paul, Quinn, Dio, Alex, Pierre, Carl, Strider and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining my Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon for as little as $1 per month, you'll find the links in the description. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I'll catch you in the next one.